Okay, so good morning all and welcome to our session this morning on preparing for a return to business travel, what employers and travellers need to consider. So One Nucleus is delivering this webinar in collaboration with Dawes Travel, and it is great to be joined today by Laura Busby, Head of Sales, and Aman Porkarimi, Consulting Manager. So this session follows on from a previous session that we ran as a Bio Wednesday last June, I think. So it really has been an interesting journey since then. And as travel restrictions are now starting to lift, Dawes have been working with companies to help restart travel programs. And so our webinar today is to explore sort of how priorities may be changing and also key considerations for companies and travellers. So once again, thanks Laura and for joining us this morning and for taking the time to impart your knowledge for our members' benefit as well. So we also want this session to be interactive. So by that we mean Q&A, time for Q&A at the end. So we're leaving plenty of time for that, but also we'll be running a series of polls as well. If you can remain muted during the presentation, but more than happy for you to unmute to ask questions at the end. But if you have questions in advance of that, then as usual, you can use the chat box to submit those, and I'll pick those up at the end and sort of fire them back to Laura and Aman for them to answer. So just to highlight also, we are recording the session as well. So if there are some parts of the presentation that you want to revisit, then you'll be sent a link to the recording post the event as well. So before handing over to Laura and Aman, I am going to kick off with one poll just as a way of understanding perhaps who we have on the call today. So I'm going to launch it now. So it's which of these best describes you? So hopefully you can all see that in progress. So if you can just select which of those best describes your role, your position, then that might give Laura and Aman, and I'll share the results in a moment, some indication of who they're speaking with today, who's on the call. Thank you. I can see the votes coming in, so that's brilliant. Almost there. Okay, so we'll end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just get your last votes in there. So I'll just end the polling there. I'll share this straight away, Laura and Aman, so you can sort of see who we've got today. So if we share the results. So by the looks of it, we have a majority of those who are traveling themselves. We do have some bookers and also travel budget holders as well. No travel managers. So which is why you're here. So that makes perfect sense. So I will stop sharing those results now. And with that, I'll hand over to, I think, Laura, you're going to go first. Brilliant, thanks.
Sure, thanks for that introduction, Alicia, and thank you everyone for joining on a Monday morning. For those of you that haven't been part of any of the One Nucleus Dawes events before, welcome. For those of you who joined last June, which feels like an eternity ago, thanks for sticking with us. And travel's certainly quite a different place than it was back then. Any further information you want on our relationship with One Nucleus and particular travel support, we have the below landing page here, gdg.travel/one-nucleus. So by means of a quick introduction, I'm Laura Busby, Head of Sales at Dawes Group and kind of the lead in terms of the relationship with One Nucleus, and we've partnered with One Nucleus for over 2 years now. So looking forward to sharing a little bit of an update, what it's been like working in the travel sector, and kind of working through some content that's hopefully really useful for you with my colleague Aman.
Morning, everyone. So I head up the consulting team at Dawes Group, and I have been a consultant, a strategic consultant in in the travel industry for the best part of 15 years now. So I joined when I was 6, obviously. So effectively what my role is to just keep an ear to the ground as to what's going on in the industry, look at what government legislation looks like, what the industry is doing itself in terms of the suppliers within it, and also what the travelers' needs are, shaping that all together to provide strategies for our client base to enable to achieve best practice.
Great, thanks, Aman. So I'll do a quick whistle-stop tour of Grey Dawes and who we are as a business, and how travel's been really affected in the past year in terms of our business. So we are the oldest travel management company in the UK, being owned since the 1920s, and second oldest in the world. This is some little TMC in Italy that pipped us to the post. We are the largest independently owned, so we've been owned by the Inchcape family estate since the 60s. And I think through the pandemic, that stability of ownership has been really quite important to us. And yeah, in terms of financial stability, we're in a good place to bounce back from the pandemic. But yeah, make no mistake about it, you know, our trade levels at the moment are 20% of what they were in comparison to this time last year. So whilst we have, what we've really noticed through the pandemic is there's some clients in particular sectors, a lot of pharmaceutical, construction, security and marine, that are still traveling and traveling quite extensively, whereas a lot of our finance and professional services clients and fashion retail, maybe not so much. So it really has been a case of working with our clients on very particular needs, and it has been very sector specific in terms of how each business has wanted to and been able to travel. So that's been really interesting. I think another challenge that we've had has been working closely with suppliers. And I noticed that if we look at the poll, 43% of people on this call being travellers, what I would say is the number one piece of advice is use a travel company, whether it's us, whether it's somebody else, because I think what's been a whole myriad of complication to work through has been airline and hotel ticketing. Can I change? Can I get a refund? All of that stuff. So for every ticket we've booked, there's been double the amount of refunds and exchanges requested. So all of that work goes on in the background, and we've still had over half our business working during the pandemic, because there's still been a lot of volume of queries, whether that's been refunds, cancellations, etc. So I think it's really quite difficult to work to call directly through to a ba.com, for example. So much easier to use a travel company to work through all of those processes with you. And when you do start traveling again, making sure that you've got a ticket that gives you the right amount of cover and flexibility that you're likely to need. Across the industry, what's been quite interesting is the amount of mergers and acquisitions. So I think coming out of this market, for looking at the travel budget holders here, there's been Agencia have been acquired by American Express. We've had Reeder Mackay acquired by Trip Actions. So we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So what will come out of it is less choice in terms of travel management companies to partner with. So really quite a key time to make sure that you really have a look at the suppliers that you're working with, and you know, your travel policies and internal processes to get back to travel. And if we think that volumes are probably going to start to increase from kind of September onwards, it really is a good time to start looking at your processes, your policies and your suppliers to make sure everything's in hand and ready for when you get back up in the skies again. Over to you, Aman, to talk about ingredients.
Okay, so if you look at the ingredients that are required for travel to take place, you know, so one part of it is legislation. So what the governments are doing, not only, you know, within the UK, and we know it's quite disenfranchised even within the UK. You have England doing one thing, Scotland doing another, Wales. So all the home nations are doing their own kind of responses, and then you also have EU, US, China, all following their different policies. So with legislation currently, what we are all aware of is this traffic light system that's put in place. There's a bit of confusion in regards to what amber means. I think is the biggest controversy at the moment, and so it's the initial feeling, perception was that amber would mean that you can travel, but take the precautionary steps in regards to having a quarantining at the back end of it, which is not required for the green territories. The testing is throughout, but it's since been clarified that it should just for the leisure sector, it's not really promoted to do so. But in the news today, we've seen 100,000 Brits planning on going to Spain on a summer holiday, making bookings for do that, even though Spain sits within the amber zone. So there is that desire to fly, the desire to travel. I'm sure we all share that. So, but the legislation, the biggest barrier to it is the lack of clarity. But the positive is that within the categories of green, amber, and red, what we have now is a review system that takes place every 3 weeks. So my recommendation to my clients at the moment is to cap your advance purchase to no more than 3 weeks, but to be in line with that review system. So that's the first part. This, in relation to suppliers, as Laura specified, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions as the travel industry looks to diversify. And you'll see that within not only the travel management companies who sit within that supplier base, but they're also within the airlines and hotel side of things. So you'll see that there are, when you return back to try to make bookings, you'll find that the airlines have less flights, but larger planes. So they're attempting to work out how to incorporate what's going on with travel today. The positives are, at least for this year, the prices remain around 15 to 20% lower than the peaks of 2019. So they're still trying to ramp up in regards to the supply based on demand, which is quite unpredictable at the moment. But I think it's safe to say that there's been a lot of shedding of costs in terms of employees and inventory. So what will return, the need to return at a ramped up rate, won't be the same as what it was before. So therefore, airlines are starting to stabilize, as are hotels. In regards to employees, for the first time, I think risk has been more associated with the personal risk rather than the geographic risk. So obviously at the moment, you see the conflicts going on in Israel and the Palestinian borders. And so you see that as a geographic risk. And then you've got employees within themselves have their own threshold for risk depending on their own circumstances. So at this point in time, it's vital that you speak to your employees, the owners of travel today, is to ensure that the duty of care side of things is related to that individual. So when you review what the employers should be doing at the moment, is that they should be looking at identifying what risk there is, and then taking it part and reviewing that in terms of the identification of the risk, taking the appropriate steps to mitigate that risk. So I'll give you an example, is that you can use the traffic light system that the government has put in place in terms of legislation, and then you can look at it from a point of view whereby, okay, so what's our travel policy in terms of green? What's our travel policy in terms of amber, and what's our travel policy in the red zones? So you can use that to incorporate your travel policy. So have a different threshold for each one. So you may decide to block all travel that's in the red zone. In the amber zone, you can have your essential trips only in relation to customer servicing or sales meetings. And then in terms of the green zone, you may have a more wider open policy to date. So realistically, it's shaping as an employer, your travel policy must shape in regards to the suppliers and legislation and employees. Laura, we've just lost the screen. Well, I have anyway.
Zoom decided to do something a bit funky.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's my advice in regards to the ingredients for travel. Now, what are the top priorities for employee?
Sorry, Eamon, I was just gonna just interrupt here. So I was gonna run a quick poll.
Yes.
Just ahead of the slide. I was going to raise my hand, but then I wasn't sure if you can see that. But
no, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry about that. So it does ties directly into in what you're just about to discuss. So if I launch poll 2, which is priorities. So if everyone on the call would like to select, so you can do multiple choice, your top 3 priorities from this list. That might then help to guide this part of the presentation. So if you'd like to go ahead now and cast your vote, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we've got quite a few coming through. Looks great. Thanks for voting. Just a few more. I'll leave it for just 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
I'm only able to get one of the points in. I'll keep trying.
Oh, really?
It's probably on my system.
Sorry, Alan.
I've only allowed one. I'll just send. I've got 2 now. So
do you want to drop them in the chat box then? Sorry about that. Oh, dear.
That's okay. I've tried. It may be my systems.
Yeah,
I'll anyway.
Double check my end as well. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I think I'll end the polling there.
Okay.
And then I'll just share those results. So for the benefit of the recording, as I'm conscious it doesn't show up, it looks like there's a very large percentage for duty of care. So that's 80%. Next in line, environment at 53%. And then we've got a bit of a tie with wellness and price, each at 40%. So, Eamon, I don't know whether that could help to...
It does, and it's no surprise. So if we look at, so what was taken as the BTA did a poll for the top, so 3,000 travel managers, and the results that came through. So much like the call today, I think some people may be surprised on wellness. Laura, we're looking at the screen that's like a preview, so showing the next slide, just as an FYI. So I'll go into duty of care. The big part about duty of care, which I implore everyone to look at, is ISO 31,030. Have a look at that one because there's legislation coming in place, and it's in regards, the best way to describe it is in regards, it will cover all aspects of corporate travel, including authorizations, planning, policy, travel assessment, transportation, destination, accommodation, and much, much more. So the idea of it is it will help travel and risk managers develop a streamlined and integrated and an effective process to ensure the safety of their travelers. So to be at the moment, that's not a legal requirement, but following that standard is duty of care is a legal requirement. So following the ISO, that particular ISO standard gives you the ability to promote that you are following duty of care guidelines, which is a legal requirement. So I would highly recommend reviewing that, and that's what I'm working on with my clients to ensure compliance to that, because the next step to that one is wellness, right? So if you look at wellness in particular, it's over 1/3 of employees say mental health affects their productivity. So wellness in regards to ensuring that your employee or a traveler is is productive, happy, because duty of care is the basic minimum requirements. Wellness takes it a step further to get the most out of your employees in regards to productivity. So I think we've all sat at home, you know, Zoom fatigue, we've heard of that one. And the realistic aspect is that it's been difficult for everyone in regards to COVID-19 has suffered in one form or another, some more greatly than others. But it's I've hardly heard anyone say, hey, that COVID, that was great, wasn't it? So, you know, I think wellness has become a huge priority because it's become more centered in terms of what your employees' needs are. So, you know, a quarter of employees are looking for well-being support from their employer. So what I'm doing is working with employers at the moment, in able to proactively identify well, again, mitigate against difficulties in regards to wellness, but also looking at how we can support organizations in not only being proactive to avoid those issues, but also being able to identify those. So I'll give you an example, is that we have many clients who rely on business travel for their well-being, you know, so that's a core part of their day-to-day activities and their family life. Not having that escapism, if you will, has, you know, impacted a lot of people. So whereas you can have the flip side where some employees may not feel comfortable returning back in, and it's looking at those, identifying those, and working with employees to mitigate those. And I'll go through some of the examples later on, as I'm sure Laura will talk about how Grey Dawes has pivoted to that. Policy and costs are other aspects. Policy relates to duty of care, relates to wellness, relates to cost. It's about compliance to the policy. So while undoubtedly travel management, your travel budget will have reduced, as travel managers, travel owners, the travel budget is reduced, but the compliance to travel management companies needs to go. So the expectation is that travel budgets will reduce by about a third, as the conversations has been had. But the reality is, from a travel management company, a third was being leaked out onto direct platforms as it was. So the idea is, you know, behind the travel management has become more integral as a strategic partner to driving policy. And of course, your policy sits at the wheel behind all of the other aspects. So if your policy does not include duty of care, wellness, cost, suppliers, data, and so on, then it really needs to be reviewed. And absolutely every travel policy, pre-COVID-19, if you still have the same one right now than you had pre-COVID-19, it drastically needs review as the travel landscape has changed. Costs, of course, I'm sure if you look at this as a track, costs will overtake wellness and duty of care. As those stabilize, duty of care and wellness, as those policies stabilize and the world's legislation stabilizes in terms of what is expected, then costs will come at the forefront as it was before. So looking at suppliers today, it's I said that the prices are low at the moment, but you can guarantee that as the peaks and troughs of demand go through. So, for example, the summer holidays, if your top routes are aligned with traditional leisure areas, then you're likely to see quite high increases in costs as the leisure demand will come first. So, for example, if you have business in Devon, it's likely to be higher than a hotel cost than it will in London, in the central London as it is today. So that's kind of unheard of, but that's the landscape that we're fitting in at the moment. In regards to suppliers, as I mentioned, suppliers have pivoted to the new demand. It's important to review your suppliers to ensure that they have that the costs in regards to costs, that what the expectations are, and also in regards to the air inventory to meet your demands. So, and finally, of course, due to safety and cleanliness. So those are aspects when you're choosing your suppliers in regards to your policy, that you make sure that those are within scope. And that's something that our consultancy department can support with. Of course, I'll just be very quick on these last 3 points. Data and the security of that data is vital. As you start to use your travel management company far more than you were before, is to identify who's non-compliant. You can only really do that with data. You're looking at it from a point of view of what kind of data do you hold from an individual at the moment? You potentially hold their passport details, maybe at a push their credit card details, but should we now be looking at holding their health details in place, for those who have respiratory issues or are categorized as at risk of COVID-19? And therefore, data security, data privacy comes at the forefront of those. Obviously, there's a huge negatives in terms of, like a fallout in terms of fines and in regards to PR if data is leaked or lost. And it happens to even the biggest organizations like Apple, so data privacy is huge. In regards to expense management, so now you're looking at a tool that, as we move towards more of a low-touch environment, which COVID-19 has accelerated, it was happening before, but we're all looking at using our apps to enter into buildings and so on. It's sure to have the passport, the digital passports that are due to take place are sure to come into venues that are not related to travel, such as large events. And that means that the more you use the mobile, it needs a plug-in to your expense provider. And that's a critical path. And lastly, environment. I think the largest part to a travel management in the travel landscape is that it's also competing with environment policy. So it's important at this stage for travel managers and travel owners to consider the impact of travel in regards to productivity and business growth, because we went through the austere times post the financial crash in 2008, 2009. And what that impacted was the reduction in travel policies, the definitions in terms of what are critical business trips was already there in place. Now there's this added layer of, do we need to travel at all because we've got these platforms? Well, one of the aspects is reviewing which parts are essential for travel. And that's not just in relation to sales meetings and client meetings, but also team meetings. Which one of those has a benefit to productivity and growth of a business whilst respecting our environmental policies?
And Aman, I was just going to run a couple more polls that tie into sort of the company and sort of traveller considerations. So I'll just go for firstly poll number 3. So 1 second. So if I launch this poll, so has your travel policy changed since the pandemic? So fairly straightforward one here: yes, no, or perhaps onshore. I can see some votes coming through pretty quick on that one.
Hopefully a lot of yeses there.
Along those lines, yes, absolutely. So I'll just, I think that's almost everyone's voted there. So I'm just going to end that poll and I'll share those results straight away. So as you can see, it's a 73% yes, 13% no, and matching that 13% onshore. Any comments on that, Aman?
Yeah, well, it's in line with, so our client base is trending around 90%, and we're working through each of those to make sure that their policies have adjusted. As I mentioned, the critical aspect is to is to look at that ISO regulation and ensure that you are compliant to that, but you're also incorporating wellness, environment, all of these aspects that I spoke about before. And as a consultancy at Dawes, we are kicking off a project called we launched the project based on the launching. So get set is the next aspect in terms of track and field, if you imagine it, and is get set as in get ready to start to travel, because you will start to see a launch around Q3, and you really, as a business, you don't want to be left behind. That's the biggest aspect. If you consider that track and field metaphor, you really don't want to be having a full start to business travel, because the reality is there's a lot, your competitors are going out there, potentially meeting your clients, potentially meeting your prospects as well. And they are meeting each other and having productive brainstorming sessions. So therefore, your travel policy needs to be in place right now in preparation for the kickstart. I mean, we've heard that the June 21st, the big, like the Freedom Day, if you will, for us as individuals. And that realistically, what that removes is the biggest thing that it removes is the social distancing aspect. And once that disappears, then it's really in a place of, at least domestically, being able to move around far more freely.
And just a point,
Man, there was just, oh, sorry, Laura.
Sorry, just a point from it. Dawes have partnered with One Nucleus for a couple of years now, and if you are unsure or haven't had a travel policy change, I'll share my details at the end. Please feel free to get in touch with us, because I think we definitely see as a TMC some responsibility to absolutely help our clients, but help the wider industry as well. And I think the one thing to probably think about with your travel policy is that, what are your peers and your competitors doing? And we do a lot of industry benchmarking, so you can kind of get a bit of a flavour for what companies of a similar size and a similar sector are doing in comparison to yourself. So yeah, super important to kind of look at that sooner rather than later.
And in regards to your travel policy, also let's not forget that Brexit happened. So kicking and screaming, we finally got there. And what's that's also caused is an impact on in visas, and work permits, if you will. A lot of the freedoms that we kind of took for granted in regards, well, whether you took for granted or not is subjective, but in regards to traveling to our EU partners at the time, is that we would travel freely. Now, we all know that that's been removed, and therefore it's coming as a bit of a surprise for some travelers who are traveling out, expecting to do work trips and being stopped by immigration officials in ports such as France, Germany. We've had a few examples of that, where they are facing being turned away, a black mark on their passport, and also being turned away in regards to, and not only themselves receiving quite a hefty fine, but also the employer themselves. So it's vital that you understand your work product, what you are supplying, and then also looking at it and identifying whether each individual EU country has different guidelines and rules in regards to UK permissions for the UK to come through. So we have partnered with an organization in regards to putting together that advisory and managing that work permit issue for you. So strongly recommend looking at that. We refer to it as passkey. So from that side of things, I recommend that your policy stipulates what is required for each country. Identify your top countries that you go to, maybe top 10, top 20, and then look at designing specific policies in regards to work permits for those individuals. Sustainability, I've mentioned before, companies currently, understandably, looking at reducing carbon footprint. Again, our consultancy provides support in terms of doing that without damaging the productivity of your business. Because we can all just say, okay, I'll switch out, or I'll turn off the lights, the electricity at home, and I'll sit, and therefore I'm green. But you won't be living for very long if you do that. And the same thing happens with business. If you sit at home, decide not to travel, be at home, there was a reason why you traveled in the first place. And therefore, it's important that you still travel when it's necessary. And we've also partnered with Forest Carbon to put together an offsetting at Grey Dawes. So if those aspects where travel is essential and cannot be avoided, and therefore carbon is emitted, therefore you'd want to offset that carbon output in terms of various projects, either domestically or abroad. I recommend looking at that. That's called legacy. And I've touched upon policy before, vital consideration for a business, which of course drives all of the aspects we talked about in that grid with the cars earlier on.
Eamon, just one more poll I think would be interesting to run at this point. So I'll just start that one now. So that just relates into your kind of previous point on the environment. So just launching this one. Does your environmental policy pose limits relating to your business travel? So if you'd like to cast your vote now. Okay, pretty much getting there, I think. Thanks all for your participation. It's brilliant, thank you. So I'll end the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I'll share those results. So we have a tie at 38% no and unsure, and then 25% yes. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that situation will change as we return back. Like as we start seeing Q3, I think the situation, there'll be more no's, less unshores, far less unshores and more no's. And because it's a growing trend. Look, but I think a lot of businesses have looked at travel and thought, well, especially financial directors, let's be honest, have sat there and thought, well, our travel budgets, you didn't spend anything on travel and we're still here as a business today. And so therefore, do we need to travel at all? And then under the guise of environmental practices and looking at that and thinking, okay, well, we don't need to travel. Let's promote our environmental policies as a higher level. Now, the key consideration there is that you didn't need to travel because nobody could, as a business, we're all in competitive industries, and therefore, if somebody else is traveling, your competitor, and you're not, there's a risk there. So I do think that situation will change. In regards to traveler considerations, now, the biggest thing to come out of this is obviously awareness. So using a travel management company, I'm biased, of course, but I think what we've all noticed at the moment is that the travel management company has, the travel agent in specific has had a bit of a renaissance as a result of this, high street travel agents and such, because people are striving for that expertise, because the travel landscape is so unclear. We are green, in regards to, like Greece and so on, but are they green for us, and vice versa? The EU is happy to, as a bloc, happy to include UK nationals to come over to their country, to their nations, to the bloc. But on the flip side, many of them are on the amber list that exists today for us. So there's that lack of clarity in regards to that, and of course the Brexit considerations that I mentioned in before in regards to work permits. And then you have knowledge based on, okay, so what is our which of these suppliers is clean and safe? That's the other aspect that needs to take into approach. And I don't want to act like a social you know, a social expert, but whenever you have a economic downturn or there's been hardship, you will see a social reform and unrest that comes before the social reform, social unrest comes. And you're seeing that all over, you know, with the Black Lives Matter movement. And there seems to be high tensions between people against the governments. And so these kind of Arab Springs that popped up post the financial crisis, you will see that again. So the political landscape and safety considerations are paramount today. And therefore, your travelers will want to know not only COVID-19 regulations that sit between with themselves, because I think we as a nation are even unclear as to our own regulations in this country. But if they're traveling out, they not only want to know the entry requirements, but also what are the local stipulations put into place. And these could change from each country to their own. Then you've got, of course, wellness. And I think that's become a huge priority at the moment for travelers themselves. And it's looking at how can I look at travel now, because people will be traveling less, but for longer. What impact does that have on them as individuals in terms of their personal time, but also on their families? And that's a key aspect to consider. So please, 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 as businesses, make sure that you speak to, identify who your top travelers are and get out to speak to them proactively, you know, either through a survey, much like we've launched today, to identify what their needs are and how their feelings are in regarding to travel. Okay.
Thanks, man. I'll finalise with talking about some solutions, as hopefully we've not given you too much to think about in terms of the changing landscape. Amanda, there's been a couple of questions for you on the chat. If
I'll answer those. Yeah,
to answer those, and I'll kind of tie it with some solutions and help that's available. So what was really quite interesting through the poll today is it was really quite clearly aligned to the Business Travel Association poll that we saw that surveyed all of those travel managers in terms of what's important. And I think, you know, our Gradore's response to that has been looking at wellness, duty of care, legacy, so you know, sustainability and Brexit and the implications on that. So yeah, absolutely, we have some products available, and I've included the links onto my slide here. So I'll kick off with Podium. So we've been working really closely with Loughborough University Sports Division to really look at wellness and duty of care across the three core elements of working from home, working in an office, and traveling for business. So if you visit gdg.travel/podium, you can see more information there. And there's also a survey that you can take either for your company-wide survey or for you as an individual to start looking at wellness. We're going to be running a series of events on the back of that. So every other month there will be an online event in which we'll tackle a different subject. So I think the next session will be an online yoga session with one of the experts from Loughborough Sports, then we're followed up by a nutrition section. So there'll be a lot of content available. But yeah, Podium for us is really taking what Loughborough Sports do with elite athletes and applying those same kinds of learnings into business travel. Much more information on our website. Moving on to legacy. Our owners, the Inchcape family, have donated quite a lot of land to our carbon offsetting program called Legacy. So throughout our Legacy program, our clients have a choice on whether they want to offset their carbon emissions either in the UK or with the Glenapp estate in Scotland, which is our owner's land, or international projects. So again, visit our website for more information. And again, happy to, I think one thing that Amanda and I have found through the carbon offsetting work that we've done with clients is it's quite every client has quite a bespoke need and requirement. So we generally will build out quite specific programs for each and every client. And then passkey. So that is one landing page which you can type in all of your travel details, and it will give you specific advice on whether you're going to need a visa for your particular trip in Europe or not. And we run that in collaboration with CIBT Visas. So I think whilst there's so much uncertainty, I found the passkey landing page very, very useful, that it is at the click of a button you can get specific advice for your particular situation. So again, visit the landing page for more information. And finally, it is a changing landscape, and I think, you know, hopefully we've hammered the point home today about it all starts with your travel policy, and Aman and I are on hand to help and support and answer any specific questions now or actually after the event as well. And you'll be able to find further details of how to book travel as a One Nucleus member through the landing page gdg.travel/One Nucleus. And range of options. So I know there's a lot of individual travellers on here today. You can still book with us as an individual traveller, and we could take a credit card payment, super simple. We have teams trained up that understand the One Nucleus programme, both in Cambridge and in London. If you have a bigger corporate requirement, again, happy to kind of tailor make a solution that fits for your business. All our details there. Feel free to drop us a line at any point. And on that note, kind of time for questions, really. And thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you very much, Laura and Aman. That was brilliant. A lot of useful information there, information for attendees to digest. There has been, thank you, Aman, for picking up Sophie's question. There's been a couple of other questions come through as well, so I'll just pick those up. So I think they're from Alan Chalmers. So looking on the home country's traffic light system, I have not located Switzerland as red, amber, green. Do you have any inputs?
Yeah, I just responded back to Alan on that one just now. No problem. So I've recommended our traveller toolkit because you're required to go to gov.uk, which is obviously this up to date. But the issue is it doesn't give you what happens on the other side, So, and then you have so many other you've got to look at the gov.uk, FCO, two different. So gov.uk is government border control. And then FCO is effectively whether you will get travel insurance or not. Two different entities, not always speaking to each other. So, those are aspects to look at. And then we also look at, as I mentioned before, once you get into Switzerland, what are you going to face in regards to, are the trains still running? Is the social distancing, mask wearing? Is there a local lockdown in place? Those aspects are consolidated within our toolkit. It takes in a lot of data from external sources. So the only thing is, if your computer's a laptop, just bear in mind it takes a little while to come through, but it's taking a variety of data, and it's still faster, still more accurate than if you looked at all of these websites individually. And then I believe Alan's asked in regards to when is a likely return to normal. But the thing is, if you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I'd have said the summer. And we're still, the Indian variant. There seems to be a variant every week. And I was remarking on this. I was thinking we should call the variants rather than the Indian variant or whatever. We should name them like with Katrina and things like this. Give them a name. But it really depends on variants. This is a moving virus. It's mutating, as we all know. But we, in terms of domestic business travel, it's been going on already. There are businesses that have had to travel as a result of their business, the type of business that they're in, so if we have clients in the freight business, they're booming, like travel technology companies, again, doing very well, thriving, traveling, so it depends on the sector that you're in. But if we look at everybody as a nutshell, it really depends on the countries that you travel to, and the vaccine, the speed of the vaccine, which I would say we're not going to be aligned in terms of achieving that magic herd immunity mark of 60-70% of the population until, at the very least, on a global level, we may never get there, 18 months, because countries like France, for example, Russia is another one. They're very anti-vaccine orientated. It's very difficult to achieve that 70% threshold mark. It may never come. So we will be living with this virus like we do with the flu. I mean, this is just my musings from what I've learned. So, but yeah, it does seem that we'll be living with this for quite some time. So we need to adapt our policies to each individual business. My biggest recommendation is review where you go, look at the vaccine status, the risk status there, review, your top routes, and review your policy in regards to those destinations that you go to.
I completely agree, man. I don't think it's going to go anywhere too soon. I have seen some comments saying shut everything down until it goes away, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
No.
So I completely agree. Tony, you had your hand up. Thank you for waiting. Did you want to unmute to ask a question?
Right. I mean, it partially got answered in the sense that it is a bit like how long's a piece of string. But in terms of now where we're seeing, you need certified COVID-19 testing, not just your vaccination status, but maybe being tested if you're not vaccinated to travel. Do you get any sense from the airlines how long that's likely to last for? But maybe it links to that last answer in the sense it kind of depends on the country and the status there.
Well, I think the airlines are, one thing the airlines have done, they get a lot of bad press, but they've done brilliantly in terms of, or pivoting their business in terms of, if you think, where do you park a plane, and then how do you got to shift demand from what was international to now more like European and domestic. So they're using larger planes on these routes. So you might sit there and be on an A380, going to Spain, as opposed to, the previous Boeing Max ranges. So it's worth looking at that. But in terms of what the airlines are expecting is that the leisure routes, every time there's a 3-week change in terms of where you can go, with the airlines move their inventory to make that possible for us to go to, right? So, and leisure will undoubtedly come first. And the benefit of leisure, of course, is that you can go and pivot your expectations to where you can go, whereas with a business travel, it doesn't quite work that way. That's the biggest restriction. But what we need as an industry in the business travel space, I think it's come through from Samantha, is like, what about the US? I think that's relating to. So the US, in regards to, there should be by early Q3 or late Q2 a travel corridor between the UK and the US. That will undoubtedly come, and it's like the Silk Roads, these key trading routes will come through, and you'll see that. They're already in Singapore inviting their key trades to have free movement, without testing, without quarantine with those, and that will undoubtedly come here in the UK too. You're already seeing that on the amber list. They're happy for business travelers to go on that route. That's what they want. That's what the amber list is for, not for leisure. And that's their recommendation. But we just need to remove that quarantine aspect and have faith in our testing for those amber lists.
Thank you, Aman. Does that pick up on Samantha's question in the chat box? Have you seen that?
Samantha, let us know if I've not remarked.
Yes, okay. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So I suppose that there's been a wealth of information, but if you could impart on attendees your top tips for reviewing a travel policy, what would those be?
Mm-hmm. Well, the top tip would be to ensure duty of care is at the forefront of your travel policy. And then look at the guidelines that we have put through as the priorities. It should incorporate all of those. So in regards to wellness, you want to ensure that those who want to travel are able to do so, and those that don't are given the option not to, and looked at the reasons why they don't want to travel. look at that in regards to, okay, I don't want to travel. Why? How can we make that easy for you to do? Like, how can we remove those barriers that you face? And if not, then that's fine. You don't travel. We'll work on different aspects. But I think expecting
point, Aman, and I think the biggest thing to remember almost is in starting from scratch on your policy is business travel is so closely linked to economic recovery. So take it back to basics and go, why do we need to travel? How is this going to help our business? And a lot of the time, the travellers are either your C-suite execs or people who generate revenue for your business. So I would say a top tip from me would be engage with those travellers, and generally they'll often be the people that are really quite important to the running of your business. So engage with them now and get them on board and and deal with some experts. A man has been writing travel policies for 15 years. Engage internally, engage with some experts. But yeah, it's just really understanding the vital role that business travel plays overall for the economy and for your business in particular.
That's an important point, I think, around sort of the return on investment, isn't it, Laura? Do you think sort of going forward there's going to be, I don't know if struggle's the right word, but if you look at pre and post-pandemic, businesses are going to maybe have more of a challenge in determining that ROI?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll take Grey Dawes as an example. I'm Grey Dawes' biggest traveller across the board, and I think there's almost a different policy for the sales team in Grey Dawes than there is for the rest of the business, because we are the ones that are dealing with clients, hopefully winning new business and generating revenue. So for us, our travel policy is quite simple, that we have sales and account management. If a client wants to meet with us, we will meet with them, because if we don't, a competitor might do that. And it's important, travel more than ever is about relationships. So we have two policies, one for sales and account management that's client facing, and then one for internal. So do two people from our finance team, one in Manchester, one in London, do they really need to spend half a day traveling to have a discussion about finance? Probably not. So for us, that's, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to policy. And really, I think that's been a real simple way that we've done it, is split out what's your customer facing and your revenue generating, and what's the rest. That's worked really well for us.
Brilliant stuff. So we're on the hour now. So just to say thank you again to Laura and Aman for your time today. It's been incredibly useful and a lot of insightful commentary around sort of what's happening in travel at the moment and potentially going forward. Some good comments in the chat box as well. So I will do a post-event follow-up, and in that there'll be a link to the recording, and then Laura, we can discuss maybe contact details if you're happy for attendees to make contact there for any potential follow-up inquiries as well. So with that, I'd just like to wish everyone a good rest of the day and good week, because we've kicked off the week here. So I'd just like to say have a good day, everyone, and thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.